My name is Hannah Blake. I used to think that losing a child was the greatest pain a mother could endure, but I was wrong. Because on what was supposed to be a day of reunion, a lakeside BBQ with our extended family, my sister-in-law, the woman who once called me Little Sis, stood in front of everyone, looked me straight in the eye and said, "Maybe if you'd actually watched your daughter instead of pretending to be the perfect mom, she'd still be alive." That sentence landed like a blade to the heart, right in front of our relatives, family friends, and my 3 surviving children who were standing nearby. What would you do if your most sacred pain was turned into public shame? If your entire family turned their backs, and the cruelest person got defended simply because she was pregnant? Share your thoughts in the comments, like this video if you've ever experienced a loss that others dismissed, and subscribe to the channel to follow the rest of this story, where truth, limits, and real love are revealed, one layer at a time. I met Nathan on an October afternoon, back when he was still a firefighter in the small town where I worked part-time as an art teacher. He had come to the preschool to teach the kids about fire safety drills while I was painting windows on a cardboard dream house the children had built. Nathan stood beside me, watching me brush yellow onto the window frame, and asked, "Do you think light has a color inside a home?" I laughed and replied, "I think it does if you know how to keep it." We got married 2 years later. Nathan left firefighting after a spinal injury and went back to school for engineering. He now works for a solar energy company. He's the quiet type, measured, introverted, deeply responsible. I'm the opposite, emotional, gentle, drawn to art, and always believing kindness can soften even the deepest wounds. We had 4 children, each one a vibrant piece of our world. Lucas, the eldest, was obsessed with books about space. Ellie, our second, loved playing the violin and painting with her fingers. Jacob was the curious one who asked why at every turn, and Grace, our youngest, tiny with curls like clouds, was the child who loved to curl up in my lap and whisper made-up stories about birds that only talk when no one's watching. We lived in a pale gray wooden house about a 5-minute walk from my brother-in-law Derek's place. Derek and Nathan had been close since childhood, so living near them seemed like a good idea. His wife Candace was always perfectly put together. Pressed clothes, hair in a bun, clear enunciation like she was always giving a presentation. I had tried to be friendly, but from the start it felt like we lived in 2 very different worlds. Even in our earliest conversations, Candace made her disapproval known. "You signed her up for, what was it, art class? Not very practical," she once remarked when I dropped Ellie off for an after-school painting workshop. I smiled and replied gently, "It helps her express her feelings." Candace shrugged. "Feelings don't pay for college." At the time, I thought it was a joke. Later, I understood. Candace had a fixed idea of what made a good mother, and I didn't fit into that mold. Her kids always ranked top of their class, joined 3 extracurriculars, and never had a speck of dirt on them. Meanwhile, mine sometimes forgot homework, had ink smudges on their hands, and ran barefoot in the yard drawing treasure maps in sidewalk chalk. "You're very patient," Candace said once as I wiped paint out of Grace's hair, but I could feel something cold beneath her words, a subtle contempt behind a polished smile. I let the words pass. Maybe I had learned too well how to stay quiet. I grew up in a household where women were taught that keeping the peace was the highest virtue, and patience was a form of strength. I thought keeping quiet was the glue that held families together. But Candace didn't stop. When Lucas won the local science fair, she commented, "You must have signed him up for extra tutoring. Kids that into science, it's a little odd." When Ellie got accepted into a summer arts program, Candace glanced at the photo of her in a vibrant painted dress and said, "You might want to teach her to dress more modestly if you want people to take her seriously." She never raised her voice, but every word, every look, was like a paper cut. Small enough to dismiss, sharp enough to sting. I told Nathan. He listened, sighed, and wrapped his arms around me. "I think Candace is just rigid," he said, "and raising 3 kids must be stressful." I kept quiet. I thought maybe if I held on a bit longer, tried to understand her better, things would settle down. But all endurance has limits. And I didn't know that while I was trying to keep the peace, Candace was quietly crafting the image of me as the inadequate mother. And when tragedy struck, she didn't hesitate to weaponize the greatest pain of my life. That day started off completely normal. I'd had a dull headache since morning, a heavy pressure that pulsed from my temples to my neck. Nathan told me to rest, but I didn't want the kids cooped up indoors on such a beautiful day. So I packed some snacks, filled a water jug, and took them to the nearby park, a wide grassy field with wooden sculptures and a trail that circled the lake. Grace clung to me as usual, holding her worn-out stuffed bunny. She loved pretending the bunny could talk and whispered to it like a best friend. I remember pinning her curls back with 2 sunflower clips before we left the house. "Mommy, can I be the guide today?" she asked, her eyes twinkling. "Only if you stay very close to me, okay?" "Yes, ma'am, I'm your tiny navigator." When we arrived, I laid out the picnic blanket and unpacked the food. Lucas and Jacob ran toward the lake. Ellie settled in with her sketch pad, legs crossed, already lost in color and paper. Grace wandered nearby, plucking wild flowers, always within sight. I lowered myself onto the blanket, exhaling slowly as the headache pressed behind my eyes. I closed my eyes, not long, maybe a few minutes. But when I opened them, Grace was gone. I shot up, heart pounding, called her name, asked nearby kids, ran in all directions. A woman pushing a stroller said she saw a curly-haired girl heading toward the main road. I ran after her, legs trembling beneath me. Then I heard the siren, the scream, the police. A car parked in the intersection, doors flung open. People gathered, murmuring, and I saw the sunflower clips on the pavement. I don't remember everything that followed, just the feel of her cold little hand in mine as I held it one last time. The sterile smell of the emergency room, the doctor saying, "We did everything we could." And my own scream, as if I could summon Grace's soul back from wherever it had gone. Nathan held me. Our other kids were taken home by a neighbor. Police investigated. They ruled it an accident, no signs of neglect, no laws broken. They noted I had immediately reported her missing and began searching, with all witnesses confirming it. But not everyone needs facts to make a judgment. Less than a week later, a friend from church told me Candace had said something at a PTA meeting. That someone had let their child wander off because they were too busy taking filtered selfies. I didn't believe it until a parent at school asked me, in a voice masked with concern, "Hannah, are you okay? I heard, maybe you were distracted by your phone when it happened?" I froze. The rumor spread like spilled oil. No one said anything outright, but I noticed the sidelong glances when I dropped Ellie off at violin class. Heard the sudden hush in the coffee shop when I walked in. On Facebook, an anonymous account posted, "Some people should stop living online and learn to parent before it's too late." I knew where it started. Candace never said a word to my face, but the things she said behind my back, those carried a far greater sting. Nathan was furious. He wanted to call Derek, set the record straight, but I stopped him. "It won't help," I said. "They think I'm weak. If I react, they'll say I'm unstable." I returned to teaching, but sometimes standing in front of the class, I felt the kids' eyes on me, not innocent anymore. A student teacher once asked, "Do you think creativity should have limits, especially when it comes to children's safety?" I forced a smile. But that night I soaked my pillow with tears. I still packed Jacob's lunch, still reminded Ellie to practice, still hugged Lucas every night. But I stopped going to big gatherings, skipped birthday parties, avoided church meetings. And Candace, with her cruel silence, continued the most damaging act of all, leaving a wound without ever having to hold the knife. I used to believe I could get through the pain of losing Grace with love and time. But I hadn't realized what I was fighting against wasn't just grief. It was a story someone else had written for me. A story in which I was the careless mother. I don't know when it happened, but the kitchen in my home, the one once filled with the scent of cinnamon waffles and the giggles of my children, had become a place where I sat for hours, staring at the floor, as if waiting for some invisible door to open and take me away from everything. After Grace's funeral, Carol, My mother-in-law came over with a pot of stew and a stiff hug. No tears, no lingering glance. She simply set the pot down and spoke. One sentence, clipped and cold. You need to be strong, Hannah. But you also need to be honest. Everyone makes mistakes, as long as they're willing to take responsibility. I stood frozen. All I could hear was a long, droning hum, like someone was holding down a car horn inside my head. What do you mean? I asked, my voice dry. Carol adjusted her shawl, eyes drifting away. I'm not saying it's your fault, but if you keep insisting on being the victim, you'll never heal. I didn't answer. I knew any reaction would be labeled too emotional. Nathan wasn't there for that conversation. He was taking Jacob to a throat checkup. When I told him, he sighed. Mom says stuff like that, you know how she is. And you think that's okay? No, but she just lost her granddaughter. Everyone's grieving in their own way. That response was like a quiet scissor cutting something invisible between us. I didn't blame Nathan entirely. He's always been the peacekeeper, the one who avoids conflict. But it was his silence, that deliberate silence, that made me feel like I was drifting further from everything I once held close. I kept trying to maintain the daily routine. I still made breakfast, still read bedtime stories. But when I looked at our 3 remaining kids, I didn't just see them. I saw the space Grace left between them. I saw the tiny chair at the end of the table, now pushed up against the wall. A few weeks later, while sorting through old emails, I got a message from a friend who worked in the school's admin office, Lydia, who had once confided in me about her son's anxiety disorder. Her email had only 2 lines. I thought you should know. Someone sent an anonymous letter to the principal, titled, "The Ethics of a Careless Mother." My heartbeat stopped for a moment. Lydia continued. I deleted it right after informing the board, but they're required to investigate. I'm so sorry. I sat there, phone slipping from my hand onto the table. The screen still lit up, showing the final line. The letter claimed that letting your child die due to inattention shows you're unfit to teach others' kids. I didn't need anyone to say it aloud. I knew Candace was behind it. The cold phrasing, the calculated wording, it was all too familiar, and since it was anonymous, she knew she couldn't be traced. But it was enough to slash what little dignity I had left. 2 days later, I was formally placed on administrative leave, pending evaluation of mental health following a family trauma. I left the school without a word, making sure no student saw me cry. When I got home, I locked the door behind me, turned on the radio to drown out the weight in the air, and curled under my desk like a child afraid of thunder. Nathan found me there by late afternoon. He didn't speak, just sat beside me and gently took my hand. Do you want me to talk to Derek? He asked. For what? I whispered. So he can talk to Candace, maybe get her to stop. I turned to look at him. For the first time, I didn't just feel like a grieving mother. I felt like a person unraveling, piece by piece. You think this is that simple? No. But I don't know what else to do, Hannah. That sentence, so honest it hurt. And yet, so hopeless. I started withdrawing, avoided friends, avoided church. I feared every look, afraid that everyone might have heard the other version of me, the artsy teacher who lost her daughter because she was too busy posing online. No one else heard those whispers, but I felt them in the air like fine dust, lingering, quiet, impossible to brush off. I used to think grief brought people closer. I didn't expect it could also become a weapon, used by those willing to twist it to paint me into the image they wanted. And when even my in-laws, the people I thought were my support system, began staying silent with each new cut I endured, I reached out to attorney Monica Reed on a rainy March afternoon. I sat in the car outside her office for almost 10 minutes before I found the strength to step out. The office was modest, just a 2-story red brick building with a brass nameplate dulled by time. But walking through that glass door felt like crossing into a new chapter of my life, one where I would no longer just endure. Monica was in her early 40s. Short hair, a low voice, and eyes sharp like someone who's seen too many versions of injustice. She didn't interrupt once as I recounted everything. When I finally finished, she leaned back in her chair and asked directly, What do you want, Hannah? An apology, justice, or protection from ever being hurt like this again? I looked down at my hands. They no longer trembled, but deep inside me was something steadier than anger. I want to make sure no one can ever do this to me, or to anyone, again. Monica nodded. Then we'll need evidence, not for revenge, for boundaries. From that point on, I began gathering the truth. Quietly, deliberately, but no longer weakly. I went through every old message, from family group chats to parent-teacher emails. The things Candace had said that once seemed harmless. Not trying to gossip, or I just think some people need to learn how to be real mothers, suddenly became puzzle pieces in a much larger portrait of calculated defamation. Monica reached out to HR at my school. A contact in the IT department, once the legal protocols were clear, confirmed the anonymous email to the principal had originated from the same IP address as the Wi-Fi in Derek and Candace's home. But what made my blood run cold came from somewhere else. One afternoon, after the kids had gone to sleep, a folder slipped out of Monica's bag onto the table. She apologized and reached for it, but I had already seen the name on the top page. Sophia Blake. Derek and Candace's daughter. "What is this?" I asked. Monica hesitated, then spoke carefully. "While reviewing publicly accessible insurance and financial records, we discovered a series of medical claims under Sophia's name, filed at 2 separate facilities during the same period. One of them is for anxiety treatment, but under law minors need a doctor's referral and a teacher's note verifying academic impact. On this record, the listed verifier is you." I went numb. Say my name to fake an academic report? Exactly. And not just that. Your digital signature was replicated from a previous school form. There are signs of insurance fraud. If verified, this could qualify as a federal offense. Time passed, but I barely noticed. My body stayed still, my mind racing through every implication. Monica gently touched my hand. "We don't have to make anything public yet. All evidence will be submitted when necessary. But I need to know, do you want to press charges?" I shook my head. "Not yet." "Why?" I looked out the window. The rain had eased, the sky was gray, but calm. "Because if I press charges now, they'll say I'm doing it out of spite. I don't want revenge. I want them to understand that I wasn't silent because I was weak. I was silent because I was preparing, not surrendering." From that day forward, I began rearranging my life. I changed our routines, pulled the kids out of the tutoring group where Candace's child also attended, changed my phone number, left the family group chat, deleted every photo connected to Nathan's side of the family from my social media. I didn't say anything to Nathan, but he noticed. One evening he asked, "What are you doing?" I didn't turn around. "I'm taking back what's mine." He hesitated. "I know you're angry at Candace, but she's your sister-in-law, the mother of your niece." I turned to face him. "You know who she is, and I know I can't be a good mother to my children if I keep letting someone with the label family walk all over me." Words never came. But the next night, he washed the dishes while I sat with Ellie, quiet, but present. Driving the kids to school instead of just asking if I was okay. I'm not sure he fully understood, but I saw him trying. And inside me something began to grow. Not fear, not anger, clarity. The news about Carol's hospitalization came on a Monday morning, just as I was making coffee and Ellie was helping Jacob tie his shoes for school. Nathan stood frozen in the kitchen, phone to his ear. I heard him whisper, "Mild stroke? Stable?" At the rehab center, and then silence. I didn't ask. I already knew. But Nathan still spoke, as if trying to convince himself. "Mom's okay. Some confusion, but the doctor says she should recover. Derek wants to know if you'd consider bringing the kids to visit." I poured the coffee, not looking up. "No." Nathan paused. I know you're still upset. But she's their grandmother." I set the cup down, turned to face him and said slowly, "No, Nathan, I'm not upset. I'm clear. And I know this. Our children don't need to be around people who stood by silently when their mother was humiliated, then come crying when they need to prove something to others. He didn't argue, but I saw the same old exhaustion in his eyes. A part of him that knew I was right. Another part that just wanted everything to go back to normal. 3 days later, I got a call from Ellie's elementary school. "Hannah, I'm sorry to bring this up," Principal Simmons said, her voice cautious. "This afternoon a woman came by claiming to be a relative and tried to pick up Ellie after school." I gripped the phone. "What's her name?" "Candace Blake. She said she was there on behalf of your brother-in-law, but thankfully Ellie remembered the pickup list. She refused to go, and the supervising teacher alerted me right away." I couldn't breathe for a moment. "Thank you, truly, for following protocol." The next morning I went straight to the school, met with the district's legal advisor, submitted updated custody papers, refreshed the approved pickup list, and filed for a temporary restraining order against Candace Blake. I also requested school transfers for all 3 of my children. I didn't want them growing up in a cloud of suspicion and confusion created by adults too selfish to know the damage they'd caused. When Nathan heard, he exhaled slowly. "Are you sure?" "Candace isn't just gossiping behind my back anymore, Nathan. She's trying to access our child, using your mother's health as a backdoor into my life. This isn't family drama, this is a safety issue." That same week I changed my phone number, disabled all social media notifications, got a new phone for Lucas, one he used only to contact me and Nathan directly. The kids didn't ask questions. Somehow my silence gave them more reassurance than any long-winded explanation. Still, a part of me kept watching, recording. I saved the voicemail from the school, took screenshots of contact logs, filed every email or message from anyone on Nathan's side of the family. I wasn't trying to start a war. I just wanted to be ready if I had to protect myself and my children again. I thought I had things under control, until one evening while folding laundry in the utility room, I received a text from an unknown number. "Did you know Candace is planning to run for district PTA president? We're at the same school, and she's painting herself as the mother emotionally abused by her sister-in-law." The message came from Angela, Nathan's cousin's wife. She rarely involved herself in family issues. Angela added, "She's telling people you're jealous of her because her kids are more successful, that you threatened her and banned your kids from playing with hers. Looks like she's trying to play the victim to gain support." Candace hadn't stopped. She had escalated, turning my boundaries into emotional abuse, using my silence as proof of disdain, my withdrawal as evidence of isolation. And with her gift for appearances, I knew some people would believe it. I sank to the laundry room floor, back against the dryer, the warm yellow light casting soft shadows over the half-folded towels. I didn't know how far Candace planned to go, but I could see what she was doing. Exactly what every manipulator tries to do, turns someone else's pain into evidence of their instability. But this time I stepped forward instead of fading away. Grace's memorial fell on a chilly Sunday morning in late April. I chose to hold it at the small wooden chapel at the end of Pine Street, the place where Grace once sang "You Are My Sunshine" during her first Christmas recital, the first time she could read the lyrics on her own. I wanted the day to be simple, a few gentle songs, a slideshow of her photos, and short stories shared by friends, neighbors, people who had quietly loved Grace in the ways that mattered most. I didn't invite the Blakes, not out of bitterness, but because I didn't want their presence to disturb the one peaceful day of the year. But they came anyway. Derek walked in first, supporting Carol. She looked frailer than the last time I'd seen her, though her gaze hadn't changed. Candace followed close behind, in a long gray dress, silk scarf around her neck, carrying a bouquet of white flowers, like she was attending a formal gala, not the memorial of a little girl who had once been part of this family. They didn't come alone. 2 of Nathan's aunts, a couple from his uncle's side, and several other distant relatives followed, as if it were a social obligation they had to fulfill. I didn't greet them. I stood beside Lucas, resting my hand on his shoulder as he searched the crowd for a glimpse of Grace. The service began with Grace's favorite song, Rainbow Connection. A neighbor recalled how she once saw Grace bringing cookies to the stray cat behind their house. A classmate from preschool shared how Grace knew how to make anyone smile, even the kid who broke his arm. I truly thought it would be a quiet, gentle day. Until Candace stood up, walked toward the wooden podium and gently placed her hand on the mic. No one had invited her, but no one stopped her either. "I'm sorry if I'm disrupting the rhythm of this ceremony," she began, her voice sweet, coldly sweet. "I just want to share something, as a mother, a relative, someone who has witnessed this loss up close." I gripped the armrest of my chair. We mothers often get so caught up chasing other people's standards, perfect pictures, stable careers, high-achieving children. But is it worth it if we forget the most important thing? Truly being present with our kids. A chair creaked lightly. I didn't turn around, but I clearly heard Lucas swallow hard. Candace went on, eyes sweeping the room. "I'm not saying this to assign blame, but as a reminder to all of us who still have our children with us. Don't let grief become an excuse. Let it be a wake-up call." The room went silent, as if the air had been sucked out of it. I walked forward, quietly, without looking at Candace. I went straight to the tech table in the back, where the projector and laptop were set up. I opened a file, said nothing, gave no warning. The video played. On the large screen in the center of the chapel, a video appeared of Candace, in her kitchen, turned slightly sideways, her voice crystal clear through the recorder I had hidden during Ellie's birthday party last year, when Candace thought no one was listening. "Conceding loose," meaning that Grace died because her mom was too busy living online. Classic case of a mother who's good at painting, but crap at parenting. But let her figure it out on her own. People like that always self-destruct eventually. A soft gasp came from somewhere in the pews. I saw Carol clutch her purse, her lips moving without sound. I clicked to the second video. The screen shifted to an image of the insurance documents. My name used as the verifying educator for Candace's child, with a forged digital signature. Alongside that was an internal email from Monica to me. "This constitutes medical fraud under federal insurance policy." Some people began whispering. One person let out a heavy sigh. Another lowered their gaze. I didn't stop. I showed the next slide, screenshots of Candace's messages to her fellow PTA moms. "Anna's weak. One little push and she crumbles, lost her kid and acts like the world owes her something." When the final image faded, I stood up straight. I didn't show these to seek revenge. I've been silent too long, and silence allows cruelty to masquerade as normal. Candace stood frozen. Her face had turned ghostly pale. Derek dropped his head, hand pressed to his forehead, like he wanted to disappear. Carol stayed seated, both hands gripping her rosary, saying nothing. A woman in the middle row whispered, "Oh God." I defended her. Another woman, the mother of Lucas's former classmate, took out her phone. "I'm calling someone I know at the state insurance board. This can't be swept under the rug." The air in the church was thick. It was no longer a memorial. It was the moment the truth rose to its feet, in its rawest, most undeniable form. No shouting, no tears, only facts, and the kind of stillness that doesn't shrink but listens. The stillness born not of shame, but of truth breaking the surface. I walked back to my seat and sat beside Ellie. She took my hand, gripped it tight. After that service, the news spread faster than I expected. A week later, the police formally opened an investigation into Candace's insurance fraud and began a federal inquiry into identity misrepresentation. I didn't make a public statement. I didn't post online. I let the silence play out the way it needed to, truthfully, without needing explanation. But then, one Wednesday afternoon, as I was peeling apples in the kitchen for Ellie, there were 3 knocks at the door. It was Derek. He stood there, empty-handed, shirt wrinkled, eyes red as if he hadn't slept in days. The front yard behind him was glowing with sunlight, but his face was cast in the shadow of something heavier, something I recognized as genuine regret. "I know," he choked out as I stepped onto the porch. "I know I have no right to ask anything, but I can't take it anymore." I held back. Derek inhaled, eyes flickering with something close to shame. "Candace, she didn't just use your name. She forged mental health documents for another girl, her co-worker's daughter, to remove the biological mother from custody." I felt a chill at the back of my neck. "She said if I didn't help, she'd report me for child neglect." I stayed quiet. I was a coward. I let her do those things, thinking it would all just pass. Derek collapsed onto the stone bench, hands covering his face. "I've lost everything, Hannah. Even my own son won't speak to me. And I deserve that. But you don't. You didn't deserve the lies, the defamation, the isolation. I looked at him, not with the eyes of someone who needed to forgive, but with the eyes of someone who had walked through the depths of pain and understood this. Not everyone is cruel, but many chose to do nothing when cruelty unfolded, and sometimes that's even more dangerous. I'll turn everything over to investigators, I said calmly, not to hurt anyone, but to protect other children. You should do the same. A few days later, Nathan was sitting on the stairs when I came home, clutching the old hoodie I'd given him on his second birthday we spent together. He didn't look up right away. He just spoke in a voice barely holding together. I heard everything. I heard what Candace said about Grace's death, heard Derek's confession. I believed my family. I believed that if I just stayed quiet, things would calm down. In his eyes, I finally saw it. The shame I had once mistaken for strength. The same eyes that once made me believe this was the man who would protect our family. I didn't protect you, he said, voice shaking. I left you alone to face all of it. And I don't expect forgiveness. But I won't let it happen again. No hug, no comforting words. I sat next to him quiet and let the porch carry what I couldn't say. I didn't sue Candace. Monica once asked me, "Do you want to press charges? The grounds are solid." I shook my head. They don't need me to bring them down. They've built enough of their own destruction. But I didn't keep anything. I submitted every piece of evidence. The insurance documents, Derek's testimony, the memorial service recordings. To the investigators and social services, I left no note, didn't sign as an involved party. I simply did what needed to be done. Then I changed my number, blocked all contact from Nathan's family, even the messages labeled "for the kids' sake." Because I had learned this. Some wounds, if touched again, won't just hurt me. They'll scar the children who need me to be their safe place. I didn't forgive so others could sleep better at night. I let go so I wouldn't have to drag the past behind me like a bottomless suitcase. And once I let it go, I realized my hands were still free enough to hold on to the good things waiting ahead. It took me nearly 8 months to gather the strength to step back into the room that used to be my art studio. Sunlight still poured through the tall window, just like before. But there were no tiny footsteps shuffling through boxes of crayons. No giggles breaking the quiet as Grace tried to color outside the lines just to break Mommy's art rules. A few pencils still sat exactly where we left them, as if time had stopped in this space since that one irreversible day. I took my seat again, opened the sketchbook, and gave it a name. Grace's room. Not to memorialize, but to create a space where children like Grace, and mothers like me, could come without having to explain their pain, a place to simply breathe and paint new colors onto life. At first, only 3 kids signed up. One had just lost her mom in a car crash, one boy was living with his grandmother while both parents were in prison, and a quiet girl who didn't speak at all the first day, but drew a picture of a door with no handle. I didn't ask questions. I let them draw. If they wanted to talk, they would. A few weeks later, an essay appeared on Lucas's school page. The title read, "Family Isn't Always Safe, The Things We Don't Say." I read it and couldn't hold back tears when I saw what my son wrote. "I love Uncle Derek and even Aunt Candace. But that doesn't mean they didn't hurt me. I used to think if I behaved better, stayed quieter, they'd look at my mom the way they used to. Now I know. I don't owe it to adults to protect their image if it hurts me." I printed the essay and framed it, hanging it on the wall across from the entrance to Grace's room. Elise started singing again. She had stopped after Grace's funeral. One afternoon, as I was cleaning paintbrushes, I heard her humming in the bathroom. A new melody, soft and full of joy. Not for the sound of it, but because the joy in each note was something I thought we'd lost forever. Nathan began therapy after I handed him a flyer from a center for parents who've caused emotional harm in their families. He didn't say anything when I gave it to him, but the next week he texted me during his lunch break. "I made an appointment. I think it's time I learned how to be a husband again, a father and a man." One day he told me about his first session. The counselor asked, "When was the last time you said sorry without expecting to be forgiven?" And I couldn't answer, Hannah. He looked at me like a boy finally realizing the depth of his mistakes. "I don't know if I deserve a fresh start, but I won't sit on the sidelines anymore." That Thanksgiving I didn't roast a turkey. Instead, I made Grace's favorite pumpkin soup, baked apple pie the way my mother taught me, and opened the door to people who weren't blood but shared compassion. Lucas's former teacher who had lost her child years ago, an elderly neighbor who helped me get the kids to the school bus every morning, a gay couple whose daughter now took classes in Grace's room, and Monica Reed, the attorney who believed me when even my own family turned away. Ellie ran around the table, taping colorful name tags onto each chair. Lucas prepared the gratitude speech like we did every year. When it was my turn, I simply said, "Thank you, not for being here, but for not leaving." When I had nothing left, there was a pause. Then the elderly neighbor raised her glass. "To the families we choose, not perfect, but never making us feel small." The clink of glasses rang softly, like autumn wind brushing across the porch. In that moment, I looked around the table and understood. We can't go back and fix what's been lost, but we can rebuild. From the kind of people who see each other with kindness. People who don't need to share blood to be family. That morning, while I was making tea in the kitchen, Lucas brought in an envelope without a stamp, just my name scribbled across it, Miss Hannah. It had been slid under the door some time before dawn, still slightly damp with morning dew. I opened it, and with each word my heart tightened. "Miss Hannah, Mom told me not to talk to you anymore, but I miss Grace and my cousins. I know she's upset about a lot, but I don't want to lose my family. I hope I can see you again someday, Ben." Ben was Candace's oldest son, just a few months older than Grace. They used to be in the same preschool class. Once, colored all over my living room wall together, then blamed the neighbor's dog. Nathan walked into the kitchen, saw me holding the letter, and his eyes softened. "It's from Ben," I said quietly. "He still remembers Grace, and us." He joined me on the bench without a word. Minutes passed, filled only by the hum of late summer air before he finally asked, "What do you think?" I looked out the window. The backyard was covered in thin fog, summer flower baskets now wilted, still waiting to be cleared. I folded the letter and placed it on the table. "I think, if one day he's old enough and brave enough to seek out the truth for himself, we'll welcome him. But not to fix the past for the adults, to protect a child who shouldn't be hurt again." "I agree," Nathan said. "But from now on, everything has to be clear. No blurred lines, no waiting for anyone to change. This house needs to be a safe place, not an open gate for those who once harmed you or the kids." That afternoon, Lucas and Ellie joined me in the front yard. I handed Lucas a small wooden board painted white, along with a jar of black paint and a few brushes. "You can write whatever you want, but it has to be something you truly believe." Lucas stood quietly for a few minutes. Then, with steady strokes, he began to write. "Here we protect peace." Ellie stepped in, drew a heart and a dash underneath. I looked at her and smiled. "What would you like to add?" Ellie tilted her head thoughtfully, then dipped her brush and carefully painted the next line. "Here love means boundaries." When the sign dried, we hung it by the front door together, not to make a statement to the neighbors, but to remind ourselves. Love doesn't mean unconditional forgiveness, or clinging to relationships simply because of blood. Sometimes love means closing an old door and standing guard at a new one, protecting the peace for those who remain. My eyes moved from the sign to where my children were laughing, their footsteps leaving soft imprints in the damp grass. Nathan stepped beside me and gently rested his hand on my shoulder. "We've rebuilt it, haven't we?" I gave no reply, only watched the footprints my children had left behind, soft and certain, like they already knew the way back to where light begins again. Maybe my story ends here, but the echoes continue, in the eyes of my children, in the way I remind myself, peace doesn't come from being forgiven. It comes from daring to draw the line. Have you ever had to choose between staying silent to preserve a complete family, or speaking out to protect what's right? Do you believe real love needs clear boundaries, even with blood relatives? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your reflections in the comments, not just on my story, but maybe on your own journey, because someone out there might need to hear what you've already survived. And if you believe stories of resilience, compassion, and true family are what you need more of in this life, hit follow and stay with us for the journeys still to come. There are still stories left untold, and sometimes one story can reach places no advice ever could.